$150. We don't serve beggars here. My sister's voice sliced through the bank lobby, every head turning, while I stood there with my withdrawal slip trembling in my hand. I didn't fight back. Not yet. No, this story doesn't start at that counter. It starts on a gray Portland morning, the air cold enough to sting, when I opened a small wooden box my grandfather left me, a box marked, "For the kindest one." Inside was a key, and a truth I'd ignored for years. That day, humiliation felt final, but the next day I learned power can whisper louder than pride. I grew up in a house where love was measured by achievement. My father, Robert, believed affection should be earned preferably with a six-figure paycheck. My mother, Elaine, was no softer. She spent her life protecting the family's image like it was an heirloom vase that couldn't be scratched. Veronica, my older sister, fit their idea of perfection. She wore ambition like perfume, sharp and sweet, impossible to escape. Caleb, my brother, was the golden boy who said all the right things and made sure to be on the winning side of every argument. And then there was me, Quinn, the quiet one, the placeholder between their stories of success. When people ask why I never fought harder for their attention, I think of that birthday when I was 9. I'd painted them a lighthouse, tiny brushstrokes of white and blue that I thought captured how light could fight darkness. I still remember the smell of acrylic and the way my heart pounded as I handed it to my parents at the dinner table. My father barely looked at it before asking what Veronica had bought. She'd used her allowance to get a small crystal vase. Everyone clapped. My painting sat on the sideboard, forgotten under the glare of the chandelier. That was the first time I understood silence could swallow you whole. Years later, nothing had changed. At family dinners, I became background noise. Veronica's promotions, Caleb's new clients, my mother's charity events, those were the acceptable topics. Once I tried to share that I'd been volunteering at a community garden that just won a local grant. I got out 3 words before Veronica laughed and announced her new title at the bank. My father raised his glass. My mother asked about her new car. I sat there smiling, my excitement dissolving into the mashed potatoes I couldn't taste. People like to say time heals, but what it really does is harden. You stop expecting warmth. You start building walls. Mine were quiet and clean, just like my apartment. I worked in data numbers didn't judge, they just told the truth. After years of being dismissed, I found a strange comfort in algorithms. They didn't care who your parents favored. The only person who ever really saw me was my grandfather, Arthur Hale. He was gentle, always smelling faintly of pine and old paper. He used to say, "Kindness is not weakness, Quinn. It's just quieter power." Before he passed, he left me a small wooden box and a note. "For the kindest one, use it when they forget who you are." Inside was an old-fashioned key. I didn't understand it then, but I kept it close like a secret I wasn't ready to read. So when that freezing Tuesday morning came, when Mrs. Patterson called in tears because her heater was broken and the repairman wanted cash, I didn't hesitate. I promised her I'd help. I just needed to withdraw $150. Simple, right? That's what I thought until I walked into Glassview Bank and saw Veronica behind the glass walls smiling like she owned the world. The line at Glassview moved slowly, the air thick with the faint scent of disinfectant and static. I could see Veronica through the glass office wall, her heels clicking against the marble, her laughter ringing too loud the way it always did when she wanted people to notice her. She looked exactly like the version of success my parents worshipped, sleek bun designer suit, smile calibrated to impress. When our eyes met, her expression flickered, then settled into that familiar smirk, the one that said she still saw me as the family disappointment. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the counter and handed the teller my withdrawal slip. Before the girl could process it, Veronica glided over the scent of her perfume, arriving before she did. "Well, well," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Didn't expect to see you here. What can we do for you today, Quinn?" Her tone made my skin prickle. "Just need to withdraw $150, I said quietly. She let out a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. $150. She leaned closer, lowering her voice but making sure everyone could still hear. "We don't really serve beggars here. Are you sure you even have that much in your account?" Laughter flickered from somewhere behind me. The teller's hands froze mid-air. I felt heat crawl up my neck, that same sting I'd felt 1,000 times before. Every dinner table humiliation, every dismissive glance condensed into this single moment. My lips parted, but no words came. For a second, I saw the 9-year-old version of myself again clutching that forgotten lighthouse painting. I saw my grandfather's kind eyes, and something inside me, something long buried, shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded, turned, and walked out. The sound of the glass door closing behind me was soft, almost kind. Outside, the wind was sharp enough to hurt. I stood there on the frozen sidewalk, pulse thudding in my ears. Humiliation has a taste, metallic, cold, unforgettable. But under the shame was something new, a current, a clarity. As I started walking home, I thought about the wooden box, about the key that had never fit any lock I knew. Maybe it wasn't meant to. Maybe it was a reminder. And that was the moment the burn began, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that forges. That night, the quiet inside my apartment felt heavier than usual. The radiator hummed like it was the only thing brave enough to make a sound. I sat on my couch coat, still on hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had already gone cold. Humiliation lingered in my chest like smoke. I'd spent years trying to prove that kindness could survive in a family like mine, but kindness had limits. And that morning I'd reached them. I glanced toward the bookshelf where the small wooden box my grandfather left me sat tucked between 2 old finance manuals. The note inside had yellowed slightly over time. For the kindest one, use it when they forget who you are. I ran my thumb over the faded ink. He'd known this day would come, hadn't he? The day I'd need to remember that quiet didn't mean powerless. I placed the cup down, opened my laptop, and the glow of the screen washed the room in pale light. Most people knew me as a freelance data analyst, the woman who worked late for mid-level firms and sent polite emails. What no one knew was that I'd built something far bigger, a private fund run under the name Shell Code 7. It started as an experiment, a predictive algorithm I'd written years ago, something that could forecast market behavior with almost impossible precision. The numbers had grown quietly, exponentially, and now it wasn't a portfolio. It was an empire hidden behind a screen. My cursor blinked on the dashboard. $4.2 billion stared back at me in clean white font. Beneath it, a list of institutions managing those assets. One name stood out like a bruised Glassview Bank, my sister's bank. I leaned back, the air leaving my lungs in a single stunned exhale. The same woman who'd humiliated me for $150 worked for a company that existed because of my fund's capital. Every bonus she bragged about, every promotion built on money she didn't even know came from me. The decision didn't feel angry. It felt inevitable. I straightened, the shaking in my hands gone. At 3 a.m., I called my legal counsel and scheduled an emergency meeting with Glassview's regional director. Tomorrow, I'd walk back into that bank, not as the quiet sister they pitied, but as their largest client. Morning light cut through the fog as I walked back toward Glassview Bank. The same doors that had hissed shut on my humiliation now parted quietly for me. I'd chosen a navy dress, simple and neat, my hair pinned low, no armor except self-control. Mr. Linton, the regional director, was waiting near the entrance, nervous, his phone clutched like a lifeline. "Ms. Dove," he said, almost bowing. "It's an honor." I gave him a small nod. His voice trembled. "This way, please." Employees looked up as I passed. Yesterday, I was invisible. Today, every whisper followed me. Veronica was standing by her glass office mid-conversation, smile fading when she saw me. Confusion first, then irritation. She started walking over, ready to dismiss me again. Then Mr. Linton stepped forward, eyes wide with worry. "Branch Manager Veronica Hale. This is Ms. Dove, representative of Shell Code 7. The name hit her like static. She blinked. Shell Code. What I didn't answer. "Mr.?" Linton gestured toward her office. "Let's talk inside." We entered the same room where she'd once laughed about beggars. The blinds reflected faint stripes of winter light across the table. I took the visitor's chair. Mr. Linton remained standing. Veronica hovered, arms folded tight. "What's this about?" she asked. I folded my hands calmly. Shell Code 7 has concerns about Glassview's management practices, specifically this branch. Mr. Linton jumped in before she could speak. We've been instructed to perform an immediate risk reassessment, Ms. Hale. Please listen carefully. Her eyes darted between us. I don't understand. You don't need to, I said quietly. It's already been decided. We're withdrawing all assets, $4.2 billion, effective immediately. Silence. The hum of the air vent was suddenly loud. Mr. Linton's face went white. All of it, yes. And per contract, our public reason will cite loss of confidence in local management. I met Veronica's eyes. Specifically, this branch's leadership. The words landed like a hammer. She blinked rapidly, then let out a shaky laugh. Wait, this is insane. You can't just Mr. Linton cut her off. Enough. His voice cracked. Do you have any idea what this means? The stock will crash. Investors will flee. I stayed still. Calm felt like power now. Veronica turned to me, recognition dawning, disbelief mixing with fear. You, she whispered, you're M. Dove. I gave her a small, sad smile. Yesterday, you wouldn't even let me withdraw $150. Today, you just lost $4 billion. Her face broke. The confident manager collapsed into someone I barely recognized, pleading, shaking mascara streaking down her cheeks. Quinn, please, don't do this. You'll ruin me. You'll ruin us. It was never about ruining anyone, I said. It's about respect. Mr. Linton cleared his throat, his tone icy. Ms. Hale, your employment is terminated effective immediately. 2 security officers stepped forward. She stumbled as they guided her out, still crying, still whispering my name. When the door closed, I exhaled slowly. Revenge didn't feel like fire. It felt like silence, finally settling where chaos used to live. But the story didn't end there. That evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls from my parents, texts from Caleb, even a desperate voicemail from my mother. What have you done? Think of the family. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay. It was always about them, the family brand, the image, the shame. So I sent one message to the group chat. Dinner at my place, Sunday, 7 p.m. Let's talk about the family. When Sunday came, they arrived expecting an apology. The address I'd sent led to a quiet street lined with cedar trees and a modern house they'd never seen before mine. I watched from the window as their expressions changed from confusion to greed. My father straightened his tie. My mother whispered something about finally living up to her potential. I opened the door. Welcome. Inside the table was set simply wood linen, soft light. Veronica was absent, of course. My mother's first words were, "You've made your point, Quinn, but this has gone too far. Your sister is devastated." My father chimed in stern, "Fix this mess. You've embarrassed us." Caleb, ever the peacemaker, smiled thinly. "Let's all calm down. We're family." I listened. 10 minutes of lectures about loyalty, image forgiveness. Not one word about the years they ignored me. Not one apology. When they finally stopped, I walked to the sideboard and brought out a thin leather folder. I placed it in front of my father. "If we're talking about family, we should start with honesty." He frowned, opening it. Bank statements, forged invoices, shell company filings, all with Caleb's and Veronica's names. "What is this?" "Evidence," I said softly, "of how you both borrowed from grandfather's trust fund. 2 years of withdrawals disguised as consulting fees. I was the executor, remember?" The room went still. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Caleb's voice cracked. "Quinn, you don't understand. I understand perfectly," I said. "You took what he built for all of us and turned it into a personal ATM. And when it ran out, you mocked the only person who still believed in decency." My father's eyes darkened as he read the totals. The numbers were undeniable. I stood my pulse steady. "You want me to fix the family's reputation? Fine. I'm fixing it right now by ending the business." My mother looked at me, voice breaking. "What do you mean?" "This family isn't a home," I said. "It's a corporation built on image and extraction. I'm liquidating my shares." No one spoke. The fireplace crackled softly behind me. Then I looked at them, each face stunned, each secret finally exposed, and added quietly, "Grandfather left me a note. Use it when they forget who you are." I think he meant this moment. I walked to the door, opened it, and let the cold air rush in. Dinner's over. They didn't follow me. Outside, the night was crisp, the stars pale and distant. Somewhere, I imagined my grandfather's steady voice, proud and calm. Justice hadn't come through rage, it had come through truth. Weeks passed, and the noise faded the way storms do slowly. Then, all at once, news spread about Glassview's internal audit about how both Veronica and Caleb were implicated in financial misconduct. My parents stopped calling after the first wave of headlines. Silence from them wasn't new, but for the first time, it didn't hurt. It just felt quiet. I moved through my days differently now. The house was mine, but it didn't feel like a trophy. It felt like space to breathe. Mornings began with coffee and sunlight instead of dread. My hands, once trembling with restraint, now felt steady. One afternoon, I stood in a small community garden behind the library, the one I'd helped fund years ago. A new plaque gleamed under the light, the Arthur Hale and Patterson Garden. Mrs. Patterson was there, bundled in her knitted scarf, laughing with children planting marigolds. She caught my eye and smiled a real, uncomplicated kind of warmth. I knelt beside her, pressing a seedling into the soil. The dirt was cool grounding. For years, I'd invested in systems that grew wealth. Now I was investing in something that grew life. The most valuable transfer I ever made wasn't money. It was my loyalty finally moved to where it belonged. I stayed there long after the sun dipped below the trees, watching the small leaves tremble in the wind. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I wasn't the quiet sister or the forgotten daughter. I was just Quinn, whole, steady, free. My grandfather's words echoed softly in my mind. Use it when they forget who you are. I finally understood. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a boundary drawn in silence. If you've ever had to walk away from people who never saw your worth, know this: you didn't lose them. You reclaimed yourself. Tell me your story in the comments, and if mine stayed with you, hit subscribe. There's more to come. I was halfway through pouring my morning coffee when my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on the screen. I picked up expecting something casual, maybe gossip, maybe a favor. Instead, her voice came sharp and cheerful. "I'm moving into your Lake Arrowhead house tomorrow. I already replaced the wallpaper, so send me $3,000 for it." The mug trembled in my hand, coffee spilling over my fingers. I laughed because what else could I do? But when she added Mom and Dad already said yes, something inside me cracked. And that's the moment I realized, whatever this was, it wasn't about wallpaper anymore. When the call ended, I just stood there, phone still pressed against my ear, as the sound of the espresso machine hissed behind me. The smell of burnt coffee filled the kitchen, bitter and heavy. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard her. Maybe it was one of Abigail's ridiculous jokes, the kind she used to pull when we were kids. But then the text came through a picture of my living room. The wallpaper torn down, the caption reading, "Looks better already." My hands started shaking. I called her back, but it went straight to voicemail. So I did the one thing I shouldn't have done. I called my mother. "Mom," I said, trying to sound calm, "Abigail just told me she's moving into my Lake Arrowhead house. Please tell me that's not true." There was a pause. Then my mother's voice, smooth and dismissive. "Yes, honey. She mentioned it. Things have been hard for her lately, and you're not using that house anyway. It just makes sense." I blinked, feeling something twist inside me. "You gave her permission?" "Well, your father and I agreed it's better than letting it sit empty. Families help each other, Hillary. Don't be so dramatic." That word dramatic, I'd heard it my whole life. Every time Abigail crossed a line, every time I dared to protest. I could almost hear my father in the background mumbling, "She's overreacting again." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. "Mom." She changed the wallpaper, without asking me. "Oh, please," she sighed. "She has good taste. It'll make the place feel warmer. Besides, you can always change it back." I didn't respond. I just listened to the clink of dishes in the background, to my mother's easy tone, as if what she'd done wasn't trespassing, wasn't betrayal. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the kitchen window. Behind me, Los Angeles glowed tiny golden lights scattered over the hills. My apartment had always felt safe separate, but suddenly it felt invaded too. Abigail had always been the kind of person who took and expected applause for it. My parents had always enabled it. I could still remember being 16, saving up for months to buy my first car. Abigail borrowed it just for the weekend. 3 months later, she returned it with scratches down both sides, the gas tank empty. Mom's words still rang in my head. She didn't mean it. "Hillary, be kind. She's your sister." I had been kind over and over again. But as I stared at the phone in my hand, seeing that unread text with the photo of my ruined living room, something changed. A slow, unfamiliar heat built in my chest. It wasn't shock anymore. It wasn't hurt. It was the quiet, precise anger of someone who'd finally run out of grace. And I had no idea yet just how far I was willing to go to get my house back. By sunset, I was already on the highway to Lake Arrowhead. The traffic thinned as the city lights faded behind me, replaced by long stretches of pine trees and the hum of the tires against the asphalt. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, every word from my mother's voice, like a match striking the same wound. "Families help each other, Hillary. Don't be so dramatic." The farther I drove, the more that phrase began to rot in my chest. When I finally turned onto the familiar narrow road that curved around the lake, the air smelled like pine and cold water. I'd always loved this drive. It used to mean peace, quiet, my own space to breathe. But when I pulled up to the gate and saw the porch light glowing, my stomach dropped. I never left the light on. The curtains were different too, checkered, not white. Someone else's taste. I parked and sat there for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to believe it wasn't real. Then I unlocked the door with my own key. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Paint and glue, fresh, sharp, invasive. The living room that once had soft beige walls now screamed with gold patterns that shimmered under the light like bad hotel decor. My furniture was pushed aside. My favorite reading chair, the one I'd carried up those stairs myself, was covered with a floral blanket that wasn't mine. I moved through the house slowly, every step heavier than the last. In the kitchen, a spice rack had been screwed directly into the wall, crooked. I ran my fingers along the drill holes. My hand came away dusty with white plaster. Then I went upstairs. My study door was half open. I hesitated before pushing it as if the air behind it could burn. And when I saw it, I forgot to breathe. The walls were pink, not soft or pastel, neon bright enough to sting my eyes. My desk was shoved to the corner, books thrown in boxes, my framed photos stacked face down. It felt like walking into a stranger's house wearing my skin. I pressed my hand against the door frame, my pulse hammering in my throat. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. That's when I saw it, a small white dome in the corner of the ceiling. The security camera. 3 months ago, before leaving for a long project, I'd installed cameras inside the house, just in case. Back then, it felt unnecessary, maybe paranoid. But now that tiny lens was the only thing that made my knees stop shaking. I pulled out my phone, logged into the system, and scrolled through the saved footage. It loaded slowly, frame by frame, until finally there she was. Abigail, walking through the front door with the spare key, laughing on the phone with someone, Mom. She waved and a few contractors pointing at the walls. "Tear this down. Paint that pink. It's going to be perfect for us." Her voice filled the quiet room through my phone speaker. "Sophie will freak out, but once we move in, it's ours." I stood frozen, watching her smile on the screen like it was a home renovation show, except the house was mine. And as I stared, the anger inside me finally went cold. Not the kind that burns, the kind that focuses. I backed up every file, labeled each folder carefully: living room footage, kitchen, upstairs hallway. Then I sat on the edge of the desk, the pink wall glaring behind me, and whispered to the empty room, "You made the wrong move this time." By the time the first light crept through the window, I hadn't slept a second. The house was silent, the kind of silence that hums in your bones. I sat at the kitchen counter laptop, opened every camera file downloaded, and backed up twice, one in cloud storage, one on an external drive. Beside it lay a neat stack of photos I'd taken: the gold wallpaper, the drill holes, the pink walls. Each one labeled, each one evidence. At 8:15 a.m., I drove straight to downtown Los Angeles to the office of Mr. Walker, a real estate attorney I'd worked with before. He was known for being calm, almost too calm, the kind of man who never raised his voice but always won. When I walked in, he looked up from his desk, eyes narrowing at my expression. "Hillary," he said, "you look like someone who's about to burn down a building." "Not burn," I said quietly, setting the laptop on his desk. "Rebuild." He motioned for me to sit. "Tell me everything." I did. From the phone call to the wallpaper to my mother's words, families help each other. He didn't interrupt. Just listened, pen tapping lightly against a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Do you have proof they entered without permission?" I turned the laptop toward him and pressed play. The video filled the screen, Abigail opening my front door with the spare key, smiling for the contractors, giving orders like she owned the place. The sound was crisp. He watched for nearly a minute, then stopped the video and exhaled slowly. "This," he said, "isn't a family dispute. It's unlawful entry, property damage, and extortion." "She demanded payment for the renovation, correct?" $3,000, I replied, my voice steady. "She said I owed her." He scribbled something down. "Good. We'll file both a civil and a criminal complaint. Civil for damages, criminal for trespass and coercion." For a moment I just sat there, watching him write. The weight of the last 24 hours pressed against my ribs, but under it something else had begun to grow, a sense of control, of clarity. Mr. Walker looked up. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we file, there's no taking it back. It'll destroy the family dynamic." I met his eyes. "There's nothing left to destroy." He nodded, once pulled a blank legal form from his drawer and began typing. The rhythmic click of the keys sounded almost musical, like punctuation to every boundary they'd crossed. As he typed, I glanced out the window. Down on the street, people were moving through their lives, coffee cups in hand, unaware that mine had just shattered the day before. When he was done, he printed the papers, the machine humming steadily between us. He slid the first document toward me and said, "Sign here." I signed without hesitation. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the quiet sister who kept the peace. I felt like someone who'd finally drawn the line and dared them to cross it again. 3 days later, I drove back to Lake Arrowhead. The morning air was cold enough to sting my lungs, and the lake shimmered under a thin layer of fog. In front of the house sat an unfamiliar minivan stuffed with boxes and children's toys. My stomach tightened. They'd moved in. I parked behind them, stepped out, and stood for a second with my hands in my coat pockets, watching the smoke curl from the chimney of my own home. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the front door. They were all there. My parents on the sofa, Abigail at the counter, Ethan on his phone pretending not to see me. 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. Abigail was the first to speak. "Hillary, you're finally here. We were just talking about you." Her tone was light mocking. "You got the letter from your lawyer, right? What the hell is that about?" I closed the door behind me, calm. "It's about you breaking into my house." "Oh my God, are we really doing this?" she scoffed. "Mom and Dad said it was fine. You barely even use this place." Mom leaned forward. "Hillary, be reasonable. She needed help. You have so much. Why can't you just share?" I looked at her, at the woman who'd raised me to believe keeping peace mattered more than being respected. "Because it's mine." Dad's voice rumbled. "We're family. You're taking this too far. Withdraw that lawsuit right now." "No." Abigail crossed her arms. "We already moved in. It's done. We spent money fixing it up, made it better. You should be thanking us." That made me laugh. I took the folder from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. "You want to talk about money? Here's something you should see." She frowned, flipping through the first few pages, copies of the property deed title certificate and a contract signed 3 months ago. "What is this? A full renovation project I approved and permitted with the city," I said evenly. "Demolition starts tomorrow morning at 9. The room froze. Abigail blinked, her voice cracking. "Demolition? You're kidding." "Do I look like I'm kidding?" I stepped closer. "Everything you see here, the wallpaper, the paint, the furniture you brought, it'll be gone by tomorrow. Rubble." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Hillary, this is insane," Dad muttered. "You wouldn't dare. Watch me." Abigail's face turned red. You can't just tear it down. I spent money on this place." "And that," I said softly, "is called a confession." Her jaw dropped. "You just admitted to altering and occupying private property without consent." I continued, each word slow and deliberate. "Every word is being recorded on my phone right now, and the police already have copies of the footage showing you walking in with the spare key giving orders to the contractors." Abigail's mouth opened, but no sound came out. That was when the knock came at the door. 2 uniformed officers stood outside their badges, catching the light. "Good morning. Is this the residence of Ms. Hillary Carter?" "Yes." I stepped aside. "We're here regarding a criminal complaint, unlawful entry, and property damage. We need to speak with Ms. Abigail Collins." My mother shot up from the sofa. "This is outrageous. You can't just barge in here." The officer's tone remained calm. "Ma'am, please step aside. The house belongs to Ms. Carter. Everyone else is required to vacate immediately until the investigation concludes." The color drained from Abigail's face. No, please, this can't be happening." She turned to me, voice trembling. "Hillary, we're sisters." I looked at her, the same woman who'd laughed on the phone while tearing down my walls. "You should have remembered that before you stole from me." As the officers escorted her toward the door, Ethan stood frozen, pale, and silent. When she passed him, she snapped, "Say something." He didn't. He just whispered, "You lied to all of us." Outside, I heard her voice rising, begging, then fading into the distance as the police car pulled away. Inside, the silence was heavier than before. My parents stared at me, disbelief written all over their faces. Mom finally spoke, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You've destroyed your own sister's life." I met her eyes. "No, Mom, she destroyed it herself." Dad took a step forward, voice shaking with rage. "We raised you better than this. Then you should have taught me boundaries, not obedience." I turned away, picked up my folder, and walked to the front door. Before stepping out, I said quietly, "Construction starts at 9. You might want to remove anything sentimental before then." I left them standing there in the wreck of what they'd built a family that called theft, love, and control care. When I reached my car, the first demolition truck was already coming up the hill, its yellow lights flashing in the fog. I rolled down the window, watched it stop at the gate, and told the driver, "Tomorrow, 9 sharp. No delays." He nodded. As the engine growled to life, I felt something loosen in my chest. For the first time, the word family didn't make me flinch. It made me stronger. And when the truck disappeared around the bend, I smiled to myself because the house wasn't the only thing being rebuilt. The next few months passed like quiet thunder. Abigail's case moved faster than anyone expected. The footage spoke louder than tears, and the law didn't care about family drama, it cared about proof. When the verdict came, the courtroom felt colder than any mountain air I'd ever breathed. "Guilty," the judge said simply. Abigail got 3 years of probation plus $85,000 in damages. Ethan filed for divorce a week later, taking full custody of their kids. My parents sat in the gallery, faces blank, as if the world had shifted under their feet. News spread through our small circle like wildfire. People whispered about the sister who pressed charges, about the golden child who fell. My mother stopped returning calls. My father refused to look me in the eye. I didn't care. I'd spent too long shrinking myself to make them comfortable. 9 months later, the house stood again. New frame, new walls, all traces of their intrusion erased. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the lake open and clean. No gold wallpaper, no pink paint, just light and air. One evening, as the sun bled into the water, I received a message from a cousin Abigail's working nights at a fast food place. "Living in your parents' basement." I read it once, then deleted it. Justice doesn't roar. It hums quietly, steady and certain, like the sound of the lake outside my window. And in that calm, I finally understood revenge isn't fury, it's peace. Sometimes I still drive up to the lake before sunrise, just to watch the light crawl across the water. That house isn't just walls, it's proof that silence can be louder than rage, and that boundaries can be rebuilt stronger than before. People say revenge changes you. Maybe it does, but for me it simply returned what they took: peace. If this story hit home, share it. Someone out there needs to hear that it's okay to fight back quietly and completely.